Hi, I thought I would do a video today on the 5 most missed problems from the E-Class quiz review. So going through the problems, one of the first ones that I saw that was most missed was 12n squared plus 3 is equal to 0. In this case, I can do it a couple of different ways. I can use the quadratic formula, or I can isolate the n squared and solve using square roots. So let's isolate the n squared using square roots. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and then I have 12n squared is equal to negative 3. So from here, I'm still trying to isolate the n squared. So instead of multiplying by 12, to undo that, I'm going to divide by 12, both sides. And then I'm going to simplify that fraction, so n squared is going to be equal to negative 1 over 4. Now, I think this is where the problem happened, is that I have to take the square root of both sides, plus or minus. So in this case, the square root of n squared is n, and then it's plus or minus the square root of negative 1 over the square root of 4. So you kind of break those two up. So then I can simplify even further. N is equal to plus or minus. The square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 4 is 2. So my final answer, how you would see it, is n is equal to I divided by 2, or negative I divided by 2. So be aware that you're going to see problems like this on your quiz tomorrow. The next most missed problem was 6x squared plus 6x minus 12 is equal to 0. And in this case, I'm going to solve using the quadratic formula. And if you recall, the quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2a. And in this case, a is equal to 6, b is equal to 6, and d is equal to negative 12. So I just start plugging in. B is equal to 6, so the opposite of 6 is negative 6, plus or minus. Then b squared is going to be 6 squared, minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 12, divided by 2 times 6. When I get to this point, I'm just simplifying. So I'm going to take negative 6 plus or minus, and then I have 36 is 6 squared. And then I'm going to take negative 24, because 4 times 6 is, or negative 4 times 6 is negative 24, so 24 times 12. And I'm going to go over here to the side and figure out that that answer is to add 288. And it's a positive because I'm multiplying two negatives together. And then I have 2 times 6 is 12. So from this point, I'm going to say negative 6 plus or minus. I'm going to add 288 and 36. And so underneath the radical, I'm going to have 324, and then divided by 12. And then I just have to find the square root of 324. I don't know right off the bat if it's a perfect square, so I'm just going to do my factor tree. And I know that that's going to be 162, and then 2 and 2, that's 81, and then 9 and 9. So it actually is a perfect square, because I have a pair of 9s and a pair of 2s. So the square root of 324 is 18. So I have negative 6 plus or minus 18 divided by 12. So I have to take it one step further, or a couple steps further, and I know that in this case x is going to equal negative 6 plus 18 divided by 12, and x is going to equal negative 6 minus 18 divided by 12. In this case, it's going to end up being 12 divided by 12, so that's 1. And in this case, it's going to be negative 24 divided by 12, so that's negative 2. So I think that now that we had the lesson yesterday, you guys are probably a little bit more familiar with that. So my answers would be x can be equal to either 1 or negative 2. Moving on along to the next one, 2p squared plus 6p minus 21 is equal to equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for what p is equal to. And in this case, I'm going to use the quadratic formula again. So, which is opposite of b, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac divided by 2 times a. So, a is equal to 2, b is equal to 6, c is equal to negative 21. So I have the opposite of b, which will be negative 6, plus or minus, square root of b squared, minus 4 times 2 times negative 21 divided by 2 times 2. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36, and this is going to end up being a positive, so because I have a negative 8 times a negative 21, so I do believe that that is going to be 168, so plus 168, and divide by 4. So in this case, I have to add 168 plus 36, 204. So I have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 204 divided by 4. Go over here and do a factor tree, and that's 102, and then I have 2 and 51. And 51 can be broken down into 3 and 17, but I really don't need to go that far. So I have a pair of 2's I can bring out, so negative 6 plus or minus 2, and then underneath the radical I'm going to be left with 51, and divided by 4. And this was one of those where I had to break it up, and I have negative 6 divided by 4, plus or minus 2, the square root of 51, divided by 4. And in this case, I can simplify, so it's negative 3 halves, plus or minus the square root of 51, divided by 2. So hopefully that'll get us started a little bit.